tell you what freedom is to me. No fear. I mean, really, no fear.
Hi guys, welcome to another video on Abantu May. I am May. And today I just wanted to talk about on the subject of change, my growth, my evolution, especially because I think with the ways and the things I say or the perspectives I have now as a grown woman. I think when I started this channel I was like 26 and I'm like 33. So it's been like a good full 7 years of growth. And I think it's only natural, like with everybody, you're supposed to grow, you're supposed to change, and you're supposed to evolve as time goes by. So I feel that maybe in the next videos or so, like even the subjects I want to focus more on, that's going to be an interesting way of displaying these new things that I have come to understand, or ways my views have changed in some ways. I took some time just to visit some of my old videos, just to see in the way that I thought and the way that I presented my ideas. And it's so funny because even though we always grow older, there is a feeling that we are always kind of the same person within. I feel what has happened, like when I see my old videos and then I compared them to maybe where I am now, it's more a feeling of more assurance, which makes sense. As you get older, you own your voice a bit more. You're more grounded in your perspectives and your views and your way of seeing the world and the way that you want to exist in the world. So I feel in so many other ways, of course, that is a natural progression. And I also love sometimes like when you guys come back at the things I share and you're like, oh, I can see how you've changed out. I can see how you evolved, because of course I have. Who wouldn't have changed in 7 years? Actually, funny thing is that today I woke up and I noticed that a video that I had made it some time ago has been removed. That's the first experience I've ever had on this channel, because I was also going through things like I want to clean some of the content because I want to maybe redo some of the content with a bit more research, a bit more grounding than I had before. Before I was just sharing ideas, which I also like. I'm not going to delete everything, but I think that some videos I want to remake in a more dedicated approach. But I got a video removed, and it's one of my black conspiracy videos. I don't know if you guys who've been here for the longest remember, like there was February where I dedicated some of my videos to cover, I think, 4 subjects of conspiracy theories related to black people. And one of the videos I made was about white medicine and black bodies, and I talked about vaccines and the scandals of vaccines that have affected a lot of people on the continent. And I remember also using, of course, cases that were proven, cases that were spoken about, cases that were shown publicly, because my video could raise some suspicion or mistrust of medicine, and it was not aligned with the WHO's recommendation of what you're supposed to think and say. As a person who believes that we all on this planet, I don't care if you are part of the WHO, I don't care if you are a doctor, I don't care if you are if you're a janitor, I don't care if you are a PhD student, everybody has the right to question things. Everybody has the right to question things, and everybody is flawed. There's no organization, there's no, I don't know if I'm talking my way into getting this video removed as well, but what I'm trying to say is I still stick strongly by the fact that everybody has the right to question things, and everybody is questionable. Like even what I create here, you can, when you see it, you have the right to be like, I don't feel like that. I don't really agree. This idea that some people are infallible and that what they say is the absolute truth is ridiculous, because they're just humans. Everybody's just a human, right? And if they're not, if they're aliens, then why would I be listening to an alien anyway? Because I'm not an alien. What I'm trying to say with that is, I think it's quite important still for me to clarify that I still believe in not only freedom of speaking, but freedom of thinking. You have the right to question things. Nobody's above questioning. And this idea, or even the way the censorship is happening digitally, it's preparing us for a world where only certain views and perspectives are allowed. And yeah, I think I'm not gonna go along with that as quietly or as comfortably as possible. I'm also not here just to be a rebel for a rebel's sake, because yo, I also like my peace. But I thought that was quite funny that the same day that I wanted to make this video, I also saw that message, that because the video I think was getting traction, especially since the panorama or the pandemic. So I think ever since that, maybe more people have been watching that, and it's just not a good look, basically. Even though, as I say in that video, most of the information I was sharing, it wasn't some woo, it was things that were proven, like journalists have spoken about it, like the corruption of vaccines, and I think it's insane that we're supposed to believe that corruption exists everywhere, but not in medicine, and what do you call it, like big pharma interest, or the interest of wealth can be sometimes put before the interest of people's well-being. I think it's stupid. We're not stupid people. Like, it's insane to assume that people cannot question that, and people cannot have the right to have a diverse pick of information to make their informed decisions. At the end of the day, I also always believe your body, your rules, and whatever it makes sense to you, always go with that. The same thing applies to me. And my body is not just my physical body, even the way I think, the things I want to talk about, those things are sovereign to me, and I have the right to think and question and believe things that make sense to me. Also, with allowing you to believe whatever you want to believe, as long as that we're not forcing the other things on each other. Like, having that experience of having something removed also made it more urgent for me to be more strategic about how I share things. I think in the podcast arena, there is a bit more freedom in speech, at least for now. So I was thinking about that. Like, I have like a whole podcast called Bloom Baby Bloom, which is like on break now because, you know, a girl's multi-passionate, so it's hard to keep everything up going at the same time. I've been collecting lists and subjects for that as well, and I think some of the subjects that I can't share here because YouTube is very much more censored, I will find other ways on my other paid for platforms that I actually pay to have, whether it's my website or my podcast, and I'll share them like that. And that video being taken down has only inspired me to make a proper video on that subject, not a proper exploration of that subject, but I think I'll maybe then more share it either on my website or share it on my podcast, something that has more liberty of speech. I think I've always been brave in speaking my opinion and sharing my perspective, but I just feel like I have even more courage than I had before. I have a lot of things I want to talk about, but I'm also very certain that it has to be done from a strategic perspective, and you have to know your audience and your platforms, and the choices and the pros and cons and the consequences of how you speak and how you exist in a world that wants people to think alike and be alike and agree on the same things, and everybody has to be politically correct. Even like on this channel, I've talked about that before in previous videos about why I don't really a big supporter of political correctness, because as we've seen with time, I think political correctness then is becoming like how you're supposed to think, how you're supposed to speak, rather than understanding that certain things we say or do are problematic, and being more focused on the fact of how do we get more people to understand. I think everybody should be responsible as a decent person, or as the desire to grow, as the desire to not be an a-hole sometimes. Like, you would want to learn and evolve, but I don't like the idea of policing the way people speak and policing the way people think and the perspectives that people have. Another thing that I've really enjoyed during my time away of not making content on this channel, I've really also diversified where I get my information, diversify which channels I listen to, and also become more comfortable with not throwing babies out with the water, like in the spaces that I try to diversify my perspective and worldview. Meaning that sometimes maybe I'll listen to a podcast or read something or watch a video where maybe I don't agree with everything, but I'm open to at least see what is the reasoning for that side of the story, and what other things that I can agree with, what kind of things can make me reconsider how I think and where I am. And I think that's also part of growing, this feeling of not needing to feel like you are in an echo chamber and not needing to feel like everything you're surrounded by is just confirming your beliefs, because you're not afraid of changing and growing, and you're not afraid of the other side. Of course, there's things that I will play and listen to and be like, oh my God, it's a wrap, I'm not listening more to this. But at the same time, I try not to be afraid of opposing views, of opposing perspectives, and I've learned a lot. Just also in a way to avoid, like I said, confirmation bias, but also having a commitment to, I wouldn't even say truth, because in the sense, I know like sometimes it's like problematic to say that maybe there's a lot of truths out there. I don't know. I think there's definitely a lot of perspectives of truths out there. But I think not being afraid of being challenged or not of having my views challenged. I think I'm still very much a person that's more for dialogue rather than debate. And I try to also keep that kind of vibe here, in the sense, even in my comment section. I think when I made my last video, I also had a feeling of, oh, okay, I hope this doesn't invite a lot of debating or even argumentativeness, because at the same time, I'm also like, you know what, I like to just explore things. I like to have dialogues. I like to be curious. I like to stay open-minded. And I don't like to belong in one box or the other. I just want to exist as a person. And I like to belong to things that make sense to me. And that is always key. Like, does it actually make sense? So even with the whole ideas of even left and right, I think at the end of the day, I'm very much more a person from live and let live, like no masters, no slaves, allowing people to live their best lives as long as they're not harming other people. I believe in whatever lets that happen, because those are my own guiding principles. So whether that idea can be found in a space that is more conservative, or that space can be found more in a place that's liberal or leftist, it doesn't really matter to me, as long as the thought of itself is liberating to people. It's decentralizing of power, it's decolonial, it's anti-imperialism, it's allowing of people to live dignified, sovereign lives. So in the sense, like, those are the things I've always talked about, but I think I've also become more confident in opening up to being exposed to different areas of thinking and seeing the world from. And I think it becomes more enriching as you get older, as you continue to learn. Like, I can't imagine where I'll be in 33 more years on this earth, like what kind of ways I'll be thinking. When I think about people that really inspire me a lot, like whether it's Marimba Ani, you know, I love Marimba Ani and her work in Uruguay. Like, for me, that was a life-changing book for my decolonization journey. Or if I think about really wise and well-articulated people who were really dedicated to their craft and to finding things that made sense, like those kinds of thinkers that were open to criticize things, to think in their own way, to find out what the true experiences of certain things really were from their perspective. I'm really inspired in my own growth, in my own continuous growth, in my own continuous learning, when I have people like that ahead of me that I can look up to, people who've continued to pass on their information, pass on their findings and exploration and curiosities. I look forward to only getting better with time, right? So that's exciting. And I think in order to be true to that, you can't limit yourself to a specific thing or a specific side, you know? I always come back to that with my living philosophy of live and let live, but also even in my videos, I always end them with like, stay kind, but also don't take no shit. And that has something that is very telling even of the kind of person I am personally, in the sense that I always meet people or even situations from that space of kindness first. And not even kindness as in like pretend to be a good person, but from a place of I respect the humanity in you and I want to see the humanity in you. And all according to how that person then is or actually shows up from their side, or even maybe responds to me, then I can be like, okay, these are my boundaries. This is what I won't tolerate. This is how we're going to coexist, or this is how we can liberate each other from this experience. And I try to take that approach in a lot of things, and the way I even have relationships with people, the way I interact with the world, the way I even interact here online. I want to be open and receptive, but I'm also not afraid to put boundaries, and I'm also not afraid to shut things down, which is another video I want to make at some point, like redefining like what Black womanhood or even Black femininity is. It's something I wanted to add to the conversation in my findings from the last video, but I feel like this topic by itself is so big that I want to make a video dedicated just to that. That feeling of having to grow up in a space where you were told that you have to be strong, you have to be resilient, Black women can take on a lot of harm and a lot of trauma, and they will always be resilient, where I was like rejecting that. I'm like, no, I want to actually honor the softness within me, because at heart I'm a big softie. I want to honor the sensitivity within me, and I don't want to be a strong Black woman. I don't want like all this stuff, right? Which was important. I always believe that each part of the path is important for your holistic development and growth. So there's no shame in any area, in any extreme, as long as you let it transform you, you let it guide you to a better space to be in, right? Without being in rejection of something, but from a place of embracing something that makes you feel more whole, right? I hope that makes sense. So I needed to feel like that, because in being put in that space and forced in that space by circumstances that were out of my control in my own childhood, right? I needed to feel like I reject these whole notions of strong Black women, this idea that the Black woman is a different kind of femininity than other women. And I'm also soft, I'm also blah, 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 whatever. And now I feel like from where I am standing, or where I am now from a holistic perspective, it's like I can embrace both areas, because I can see the power in both, and I'm not rejecting one because one was forced down on me, right? It's kind of also like how for a long time maybe Black women have felt that they needed to denounce softness and a certain kind of femininity, because they didn't live in environments that were safe for softness, safe for the idea of femininity, right? Which again, I think I made a video about that, like how the Eurocentric worldview also influences a lot how we see femininity and even masculinity, and to be mindful if you're trying to reconnect to your femininity, that you're not just trying to softly colonize yourself into a narrowed understanding of femininity, or even how a woman's femininity is supposed to show up. It's almost like also in the world of spirituality, and people think that just because you're spiritual, you have to be a certain way, speak a certain way, dress a certain way. But I feel like when you explore spirituality, it's you being in harmony with your own spirit, with your own soul, and your connection to the whatever else that you believe in is the encompassing energy or force or deity that holds us all together. Just like in spirituality, we learned that spirituality is not a performance. A lot of these things come from the idea that we come from a world where we're performing because we're not true to ourselves. So then you just find yourself moving into another character and then performing that character, where what I believe in from a space of liberation and sovereignty is you actually recognize all the ways that you find yourself performing rather than existing. It's something I also talk a lot about in my sessions. Like I always ask the people I work with, are you performing a certain role, or are you actually being in tune with yourself and vulnerable and aware of what you actually think, and if this actually makes sense to you, right? So it's the same way I try to approach my womanhood. It's the same way I try to approach my blackness. It's the same way I try to approach my purpose or my place on this earth, this lifetime, regardless of how long I have the privilege of being here. It's the idea of I want to have a true expression of me as May. I don't want to be performing anything based on what is expected from me, based on what a true feminine woman is, what a masculine woman is, what a black woman is, an African, a Ugandan woman is. No, I want to actually exist fully, in tuned, present, with agency, choosing my actions, my experiences, my expressions, because that's what makes sense to me, right? So that's the reflection I always have. Like, am I performing something? Am I swearing allegiance to something that actually doesn't make sense? That's why another thing from my growth has always been not ever committing to any sort of dogma. One thing I really love watching in my free time is like cults, and how cults come to be, like how people slowly enter this group, and it's beautiful, it's wonderful, they're getting all these benefits, and then plot twist, it's a cult. And it also made me think that in a way, a lot of things that we've normalized are just also cultish in a way, but we've done it on such a huge scale that we can't see that it's cultish because everybody has opted in. Anyway, that's a whole other subject of itself. But I always think about in the way that cults come to be, and there's always this need for you to plead allegiance, sole allegiance to an idea or a purpose or something. And I feel like it's always the beginning of a stupid mistake. Because especially if that thing is external from you, something outside of you, you are then a slave to that in some way, like wherever that tells you to go or how you're supposed to respond. Like it's the same thing with people who belong to certain political parties, and then they feel like I have to believe in everything this side says because that's my side, and I can't be in any way in agreement with anything that's on the opposite. It's a complex seeking the understanding of yourself. It's what you are focused on, what you're not and what you're against, instead of what am I for and where do I find the things I'm for, even different things, right? So from a place of even the things I value, like whether it's the way I eat, whether it's the way I buy things or don't buy things, the way I try to add to the world I want to exist in, to live according to the principles that I feel are important to me, I always try to be not dogmatic about it. Whatever you believe in, like try to live up to at least 70% of it, but leave the 30% to be your sanity room, right? And that can be different in different things. Certain things you do feel like you can honor 100%. But that 70-30 ratio kind of lets you be human wherever you go, and also lets you hold things with a soft grip and not be so dogmatic and extremist and radicalized basically in anything you join, right? So I feel like that's also something as I've aged, I've become much more balanced about. And I think that also really sprung from how I grew up as a religious person. And for me, my religion was very personal to me. It was something that I had a personal relationship with. It wasn't, again, performing. One thing about me since I was young has always been that if I believe in something, if something is really true to me, I try my best to honor that to the best of my ability, right? So even when I was religious, that's how I approach my beliefs. That's how I approach my religion. I used to be a Seventh-day Adventist. And for me, I was always intrigued about how I left, which is ironic. I left religion because I had decided at some point while I was religious to understand my belief a bit better. And I remember having this very, very, very clear thought, which was, if something is true, it cannot fear being questioned. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to read all the sides, because if this is the truth, it should not be afraid of being questioned. And it was like a pursuit for me to feel more grounded in my beliefs, in my religion. And I opened the floodgates and I read everything I could get my hand on. Like I was like, everything from the beginning. I'm like, if I'm going to dedicate my life to this, I need to really understand it, not just what this book says, but how was this book made? What are these books, the collection of? Who got to decide? Things I had never even learned about. And then I was like, everything just opened up. And I was like, at the end of a 3-week, like every day, I remember I was in Paris, I was doing an internship. Every day when I come home, I just spend hours on the computer, researching, reading, learning. And then at the end of those 3 weeks, I was like, I can't believe in this anymore, because it didn't hold up. It didn't make sense to me anymore. And if I'm going to dedicate my life or my movement or my approach to life to something, it needs to make sense to me, or else I feel like a fraud, and I don't want to be a fraud to myself especially. So that was another thing that I feel in my growth has become very strong, in the sense that I know how I once believed in something that felt so true, so complete, so unquestionable. I felt that in my core, I had a personal relationship with what I believed in my Bible. And to go to that place where I'm like, I don't believe in that, like it doesn't make sense to me. And saying all that, I'm still very live and let live, which also means religion. You're allowed to, and I'll defend the right for people to worship what they want to worship, as long as your religion is about you and for you, and it's not enforced on everybody. Like, that's where I draw the line. So I feel like after leaving that and recognizing that's not the path for me at all, it made me very humble, in the sense of whatever you believe in, maybe it's just a matter of other perspectives before you don't believe in that anymore. And I don't see that as something that's scary or makes me feel like I have no grounding. Whatever you believe in, yes, believe in it and be true to it, but also leave space for being wrong, right? And that made me also less afraid of being wrong. Like, even when I share my perspectives here, by the time I have researched something, I have recorded it, I have edited it, I have taken things out, put things back in, uploaded it, published it. Best believe that in each section I'm like, do I really resonate with this? Does this really make sense to me? By the time I press publish, I've surrendered. I'm like, okay, this is where I am currently. This is what I believe in. This is what I want to share from that perspective. I think I've also grown into a space of, I'm also not afraid of being wrong, because I don't have an attachment to my worldviews, my opinions, in a way where I see them as, I don't want to see anything that could change my mind about this, because I just need to believe that this is true. Of course, maybe there are areas within me that might be the case, but even when I do find them, I try to challenge them, right? Becoming older, becoming more confident in changing my mind if something no longer makes sense, becoming more confident in my ability, to even admit if something does come up, like, oh, I was a bit wrong about that. But I would never do it from a place of the person I used to be was wrong. Like, the person I used to be needed to be religious. That person needed to have that guiding force in a part of their life. And that person actually benefited from being religious in that space, in that time. And I would never say that person was wrong and that I should have never been religious, or I should have never been a certain part or stage of my life, because I see it as a continuous growth, and I see that each part, each chapter is important for the bigger scope of the book or character development. So that makes me also less afraid of being wrong, because it's just a growth, it's just a change of perspective, an expansion due to more information. And why would you ever want to shame yourself for that or judge yourself for that? By not needing to judge myself for that, it also makes it easier for me to hear people out, because I'm not there trying to prove my point. Another thing in regards to that is, I don't believe in convincing people of a narrative, a perspective, an idea. Even when I was religious, I was not a missionary kind of religious person. I was like, this is what I believe in, this is what makes sense to me. And I had people who literally decided to believe more in God and become more religious because they were friends with me, right? So I think in my approach of the things I share, in the perspectives I have no interest of convincing anything to anyone or my idea to. I share stuff, I share my findings, I share my explorations, but I have no desire to convince anybody that I'm right. I have no desire to convince someone that they're wrong. Like, I can see videos of people I absolutely disagree with, and I'll see them and be like, okay, that's a perspective. Or I might even be like, oh, wow, you're such an asshole. And then move on with my life. I'm not going to debate that person. Why would you say that? I'm like, that's you. That's your space. Enjoy, you know? And I think we should live in a world where there's more space and tolerance for that. I understand, of course, there's limit to that, because some perspective or some people's opinions are very dependent on physically harming and limiting other people. That's where I obviously draw the line, because then you are affecting other people's lives. But you saying, for example, if somebody was to be in a video saying I think African women are the worst, the scum of the world, I'd be like, okay. And we move on, because why would I waste my time, my life force in life, this precious thing that I've been given for whatever long time I might be here, on convincing people that that's not true to me, like that's wrong and that's problematic. I don't care. Like, you've made your bed, lay in it, you know? The best I could come to that is what I do in some of my videos, where I'm like, okay, there are people who believe this or experience that, or there are people who hold these opinions and I don't agree with that, blah, blah. I'll do that on my space, in my perspectives, in my and my take on the conversation, or in my take on the subject. But I have no interest in making sure that my opinions or my perspectives are enforced or forced on others, or they're there to convince other people to join me in what I believe. I share. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, that's okay. That's your right. That's your sovereign right to choose what makes sense to you and to choose how you want to exist in this world. And I have the same right as well. And by honoring that in you, then it's also something I know that I also have the right to. And I think we live in a world that's very ideologically codependent, in the sense that a lot of people feel like their worldview only makes sense if everybody also agrees it's the only worldview that makes sense. And I feel like that's so silly and that's so childish and immature. Because, okay, good luck. At least you're gonna have a hard time in life if all you care about is convincing people why they're wrong and you're right. That's why, like, that guy who likes to make videos about, I have this opinion, change my mind. Even though, like, I think it's more of a dialogue, which I think is good and it's important, I think I'm just not somebody who'd ever volunteer that I want to change your mind. I'm like, okay, cool. Have a good day. Regardless if it's something I agree or disagree with. Maybe it's something I agree with, I might be like, why do you think like that, you know? But if it's something I really strongly disagree with, and I've made my own effort to understand it and to stand where I'm standing, because I don't have strong opinions about things unless I've made an effort to understand them. Another key part. You won't see me talking about stuff that I'm just willy-nilly about. Most of the things I share are the perspectives I have. To some degree, I've put some thought in it. I've put some research in it. I've put some effort in understanding even opposing views of that. So basically, with what I'm saying is that that's another way I think I've grown, and it's made it easier for somebody who is very maybe soft and very sensitive to exist in this kind of world, or even in this kind of form of creation, where you do get to expose yourself to a lot of people and not everybody thinks like you, not everybody agrees with you. It's made it easier because it's a place of, I'm just sharing my center or my corner of the world, but it's not, this place doesn't justify its existence by making sure that everybody else agrees, or making sure that everybody else likes it or wants to be a part of it. Like, that's their right, you know? When I decentered whiteness in the way I exist in the world, and when I decentered patriarchy and imperialistic ideologies, capitalistic ideologies, and live in a way where, okay, I still live in these realities, so how do I best navigate as a person who's trying to reclaim my sovereignty? I think that also has come to the space of this lack of desire also to teach people and educate people about things they have no real interest in learning about or caring about. I've met a lot of people that have also really touched me. I've always been moved by people who didn't have a force to get things, because as an African woman, as a queer person, you're kind of forced to get certain things because you don't have the comfort of being blind, where other people do have the comfort of staying blind because the world is working quite perfectly for them. Being in spaces where people didn't have to, and they still made an effort to learn, you know, they still made an effort to understand perspectives that don't concern them or don't affect them. That is something that really also made me understand that obviously there are people who have enough empathy and enough awareness and enough interest in humanity to care about learning and educating themselves on subjects, even though it might put where they are in life in a more negative space or in the oppressive space. They still want to learn so that they can help be part of making a change, changing things, right? Whether people who are from a different sex than that is oppressed, a different sexuality than those that are oppressed, a different race than those that are oppressed. It's beautiful to see, and it makes me believe in humanity, but it's also made me understand that don't just stick to people because of a certain race, a certain gender, but recognize that that goodness and those characteristics and qualities are found in all people from all walks of lives, right? I've been more appreciative of. Like, wow, you can have more in common with somebody who looks nothing like you, who comes from a totally different background, maybe a background of pure privilege, and they can get you more than somebody sitting in the same mud puddle that you are sitting in, right? So I might share my perspectives and my opinion, but then what somebody else decides to do with that also is more about their character and who they are. And people who make you feel like you have to drag them through it and convince them and no, boy. No, we're not doing that. You can just stay where you are. It's fine, because I believe that the world is going to change and it's going to evolve, and certain things are going to be left behind in some way. Certain people, certain ideologies, certain ways of being are going to be left behind naturally by themselves, right? At least that's what I believe in. That's what I'm... As I've changed, as I've grown, I've also recognized that at the same time, my core is the same, right? My purpose for being here is the same, which is the desire to create things that when I was younger and I was looking around didn't exist. I like the idea that maybe somebody who's 10 years younger than me, 20 years younger than me, can find my content and the things I talk about and be like, now that makes more sense to me, you know, or that gives me a different way to exist, or that makes me feel more empowered. I think that for me is still the same purpose as I started this channel with. It's still very important for me to have that positive impact to the best of my ability. Yes, I want younger me, I want younger us's to find content that is empowering and helps them expand their way of seeing the world, expand their way of questioning, of living in this world, where they know that you have the right to think the way you want to think, and to question things that don't make sense, to let go of things that no longer make sense to you, no longer are aligned with you. You have the right to grow in a way that feels authentic to you. You have the right not to live a life of performance, but actual authentic existence, and see who you truly are, not who you are meant to be or required to be or forced to be, but who you truly are. And you can only do that by exploring, by questioning, by being open-minded, by engaging with different ideas and perspectives, and to trust your own core and your own center to guide you as holistic and as compassionate and graceful through that path as it can, to the day that your time's up and you leave. What are you leaving behind, you know? And that's another thing. I try to measure the things I create. If this is the only thing that I get to leave behind, is it stuff that I'm happy with? Can I rest peacefully doing that? And for the most part, I can, and I like that. I like that I can stand by my shit for the most part. And the things I don't, I'm also okay with, because I'm like, oh, okay, I've changed. Now that's not how I see that anymore. And I hope that you guys also are growing and evolving, and some of you will grow more into my space and some of you will grow out of it. And I really also mean that truly, that I release you with peace, because I experienced that too with certain content creators, and that's perfectly okay, and that's perfectly normal. It's the way life is, you know. We are totally always meeting and walking together and then partying and going and meeting other tribes or other communities that we resonate with. Life is a beautiful thing. You're not stuck. You're not a tree. But you can still be grounded within yourself, but you're free as a bird at the same time. At least that's how I see the way I approach life, right? So thank you for being here for the journey. Thank you and welcome to the new subscribers. I hope you like what you find here. And I will see you in my next videos. Remember to stay kind. But as always, always, always at the same time, don't take any shit from things that you don't need to take shit from. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye.
Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're giving me wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry.